Before we jump right into our first chapter for this semester, I'm going to do a brief review of rounding. The reason is when we enter our answers into the Pearson website, it's going to be crucial that we are rounding to the correct decimal places, otherwise it might count an answer incorrect when actually we are very, very close. So looking at the top of this page, we have a place value chart up here. So on the left side of our decimal point here, we have our whole number place values. So thousands, hundreds, tens, ones. We go down to our decimal point, and then as we move to the right, we start dividing by 10. So 1 divided by 10 is 1/10, so our first decimal point is the 10th place. We divide by 10 again, well then we get 100, so 1/100th is our next decimal place. Then we have thousands and 10,000s. So as we're going through and we're thinking about these, just remember that there is no ones place on the right side of our decimal. Right, our first decimal value is always our tenths, our second is our hundredths, third is our thousands, and so on and so forth. So when we're going through and we're actually rounding our decimals, the first thing we want to do is identify our place digit that is to be rounded. We can underline it, we can make some different markings. As we're going through the next example, I'll kind of show you what we mean by that. Right, then we're going to look at our rounding digit that is directly to the right of that. If that rounding digit is 5 or higher, we're going to round up. Rounding up means we add 1 to the place digit. If that rounding digit is 4 or lower, we're going to round down. Round down is kind of misleading because we're not actually going to move that digit down. It's actually going to stay the same as to where it originally was. Then we're going to eliminate all digits to the right of that rounded place digit, but we are going to keep zeros if needed, right, in our rounding place digit. Okay, so let's work through some examples. Right, so here we have a little table set up. We are rounding to the nearest place, and then our last column is going to be where we're going to provide our answer. Right, so we're going to round 4.723 to the nearest tenth. Right, so our 10th place, remember, is our first place after our decimal, so that is our 7. So we are going to cut this decimal off after that 7. Right, so everything to the left of that 7, we're going to keep. So we're going to keep our 4, and we're going to keep our decimal point. Right, and then as we look at this, to the right of that red line that we have there, we have a 2. So that means that 2 is 4 or lower, so our digit is going to stay the same. So our answer is going to be 4.7. So the blue number, right, is the portion that we kept. Right? So our blue number is the portion that we keep, and then that last actual digit that's rounded, right, that's the digit that we are showing in green. And then on the other side of our table, that red line is where we are cutting off our decimal. Right? That is a place value that we are rounding to. Okay, so let's look at the next one. 0.3156, right? And we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. Hundredth is 2 place values. So we're going to keep 2 place values and get rid of everything else. Right? So we're going to keep our 0, our decimal point, and our 3, and then we need to decide what's going to happen to that 1. Is that 1 going to stay a 1, or is it going to turn into a 2? Remember, it always stays the same, or it goes up, it never goes down. Well, since we have a 5 to the right, our rounding digit is 5, that means that our 1 is going to go up to a 2, so we're going to get 0.32 for this answer. Right, for our next one on our table, 1.2508 to the nearest hundredth place. Again, hundredth place means we're cutting it off after 2 decimal values. Right, so in this case, we're going to keep our 1, we're going to keep our decimal point, we're going to keep our 2. Then we need to decide what we want to do with this 5. Right, do we want to keep it a 5 or do we want to change it into a 6? Well, we're going to look at that rounding digit to the right. We have a 0. 0 is 4 or lower, so we're going to round down, which means we actually stay the same. So this 5 is not going to change, and this rounds to 1.25. Right, for our next one, 5.80253. This time we're asked to round to the nearest thousandth. Thousandth means we're going to keep 3 decimal values. So we're going to cut this off after our 3rd decimal value. We're going to keep our 5. We're going to keep our decimal point. We're going to keep our 8. We're going to keep our 0. And then we need to decide, is this 2 going to stay a 2 or is it going to move up to a 3? Well, in this case, it's going to move up to a 3 because we have a 5 as a rounding digit, so we are going to round up. All right, these next 3 are slightly different. They're slightly different because we're going to have a bunch of zeros involved. So in step 4, where it says we want to keep the zeros if needed, that's going to be what we're going to see in these next few examples. So 7.038 to the nearest tenth. Tenth means 1 place value after our decimal point. So we're going to keep our 7, we're going to keep our decimal point, and in this case, 0 is the number that's in question, the number that's being rounded. Well, we have a 3 to the right, so that 0 is not going to change. Right? Rounding down means we're going to stay the same. So we're going to keep our answer of 7.0. 0.1964 rounded to the nearest hundredth. That means 2 places. Right? So in this case, we're going to have more than one value that changes. Our 0 out front and our decimal point are going to be the only things that we keep. Because if we look at this, next to our 9 we have a 6. Well, that's going to make our 9 go up to a 10. Well, we can't force that 9 to be a 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to think about that 9. It's not just a 9, but a 19. And if we go up by 1, that means that we're going to go up to 20. So rounding this to the nearest hundredth, we get 0.20. Right, then this last example is going to be kind of similar. This time we have 3 place values that we are keeping. 0.09973. So again, we're going to keep that 0 and our decimal point out front. Right, after our decimal point, this 099, well, that's really 99. We add 1 more to it, we round up 1. Because of the 7 on the other side, well, 99 rounds up to 100. So we're going to get 0.100 for our final answer. So again, the reason that I took a couple of minutes to go through these examples is that as we are entering our answers into my math lab and my stat lab working with Pearson, right, we are going to be asked to round to specific place values. If we do not round correctly, our answer could be counted incorrect. So we want to make sure that as we're going through and we're working on these problems, we're being very careful of our rounding as we go.